Why is Canada becoming one of the most immigrant-friendly countries on the planet? Every year, hundreds of thousands of people pack their bags and move to the Great White North. But where are they coming from? Some countries might surprise you, while others completely dominate the list. From tech geniuses to healthcare heroes, and from spicy food lovers to business masterminds, these immigrants are shaping Canada's future in incredible ways. But which country is sending the most immigrants, and how are they changing life in cities like Toronto, Vancouver, and Calgary? Stick around. You won't believe who takes the #1 spot. Number 10. France. Alright, let's kick things off with a surprise. France. You might think most immigrants to Canada come from developing nations, but nope. Our baguette-loving friends are moving across the Atlantic in massive numbers. In 2024, more than 15,000 French citizens became permanent residents of Canada. That might not sound like a lot, but wait. Since 2015, over 120,000 French nationals have made Canada their new home. That's like an entire city of French people living in the Great White North. But why are so many French people leaving the land of wine, cheese, and the Eiffel Tower? Well, one word: jobs. France has a relatively high unemployment rate, hovering around 7% in 2024, while Canada has been aggressively welcoming skilled workers under its Express Entry program. Plus, salaries in Canada are often 30 to 50% higher than in France for similar jobs, especially in tech, engineering, and healthcare. And let's talk about Quebec. Montreal is practically a French city in North America. Over 80% of people in Quebec speak French, and the province has dedicated immigration programs for French speakers, making it easier for them to get PR, permanent residency. In fact, more than 90% of French immigrants end up in Quebec. Imagine living in a city where you can enjoy authentic croissants while watching the snowfall. Pretty cool, right? Of course, it's not all smooth sailing. Some French immigrants struggle with the brutal Canadian winters. Paris winters rarely go below freezing, but in Montreal, try minus 20 degrees Celsius in January. That's a temperature drop of over 30 degrees Celsius. Ouch. But despite the cold, Canada offers a higher quality of life, better work-life balance, and a welcoming atmosphere for newcomers. So, if you ever find yourself in Montreal and hear someone complaining about the horrible coffee, chances are you've just met a newly arrived French immigrant. Number 9. Pakistan. If you've ever walked through Toronto, Vancouver, or Mississauga, you've probably met someone from Pakistan. And that's because Pakistani immigrants are a huge part of Canada's multicultural fabric. In 2024, over 20,000 Pakistanis became permanent residents in Canada. And since the year 2000, more than 500,000 Pakistanis have moved here. That's 500,000 people. Basically, an entire city's worth of Pakistanis living in Canada. So, why are so many Pakistanis choosing Canada? Well, there are a few key reasons. First, education. Canada is one of the top destinations for Pakistani students, with over 17,000 Pakistani students enrolling in Canadian universities every year. Why? Because Canada offers world-class education at a fraction of the cost compared to the US or UK. Plus, after graduation, students can apply for post-graduation work permits, PGP, which allows them to stay and work in Canada. Many of them transition into permanent residence. Second, family sponsorship. Canada has one of the most family-friendly immigration policies in the world. Pakistani families are very tight-knit, and once one family member moves to Canada, they often sponsor their relatives to join them. This explains why cities like Toronto and Mississauga have massive Pakistani communities. In fact, there are over 200,000 Pakistanis in Ontario alone. Third, business and employment opportunities. Canada's labor shortage has been a big win for Pakistani immigrants. The government has been actively recruiting workers in healthcare, IT, and skilled trades, fields where many Pakistanis excel. Canada also has an entrepreneur visa program, which has led to an explosion of Pakistani-owned businesses. You can walk through areas like Gerrard Street in Toronto and find dozens of Pakistani restaurants, grocery stores, and businesses thriving. Of course, moving to Canada isn't always easy. The weather is a big challenge. Pakistanis are used to scorching 40 degrees Celsius summers, so facing minus 30 degrees Celsius winters in places like Winnipeg can be a real shock. But thanks to strong community networks, new immigrants quickly adjust, finding halal food, mosques, and familiar cultural events. At the end of the day, Pakistani immigrants are helping shape Canada's future, one biryani restaurant at a time. Number 8. Iran. Let's talk about a country that's making headlines when it comes to highly educated immigrants. Iran. In 2024, over 25,000 Iranians received permanent residency in Canada. And since 2015, more than 150,000 Iranians have moved here. That's a staggering 50% increase in Iranian immigration in just a decade. What's causing this massive migration? The main reason: education and skilled jobs. Did you know that Iranians are one of the most highly educated immigrant groups in Canada? A whopping 70% of Iranian immigrants hold at least a bachelor's degree. In fact, Iranians dominate fields like engineering, medicine, and IT. Many Iranian students choose Canada for higher education, especially in tech-heavy cities like Vancouver, Toronto, and Montreal. Another major factor: economic instability in Iran. Due to international sanctions and inflation, which hit a mind-blowing 50% plus in 2024, many young Iranians are looking for stability and better opportunities abroad. Canada's Startup Visa Program and Skilled Worker Program are perfect for these highly talented professionals, allowing them to build careers and even launch businesses. And let's talk about community. Canada's Iranian population is estimated to be around 300,000, with huge concentrations in Toronto, Richmond Hill, North York, Vancouver, North Vancouver, and Montreal. Walk through these areas and you'll see Persian restaurants, grocery stores, and businesses thriving. The famous Tirgan Festival in Toronto attracts over 150,000 visitors annually, making it the largest Iranian festival outside of Iran. Of course, adjusting to Canada isn't always easy. One of the biggest challenges for Iranian immigrants: cultural differences. Iran has a strong family-oriented society, and moving to a country where independence is valued can be a big shift. Plus, many Iranian newcomers struggle with licensing issues. For example, Iranian doctors, engineers, and lawyers often have to retrain to meet Canadian standards, which can take years. But despite these challenges, Iranians are thriving in Canada, contributing to science, business, and culture in a big way. Whether it's a Persian bakery in Vancouver or a top Iranian software engineer working at Shopify, Iranians are building a strong future in Canada. Number 7. Eritrea. Despite its small population of about 3.7 million, Eritrea has been one of the fastest-growing immigrant groups in Canada. In 2024, over 10,000 Eritreans received permanent residency in Canada, and since 2010, more than 60,000 Eritreans have made Canada their new home. That's nearly 2% of Eritrea's entire population. So, why are so many Eritreans moving to Canada? One major reason: political instability. Eritrea has been under a one-party rule since 1993, with a mandatory military service policy that can last indefinitely. This has pushed thousands of Eritreans, especially young men, to flee the country in search of freedom and better opportunities. Canada, known for its strong refugee policies, has become one of the top destinations for Eritrean asylum seekers. In fact, Eritreans make up one of the largest refugee groups in Canada. But let's talk about community, because this is where Eritreans shine. When new immigrants arrive in Canada, they're never alone. Cities like Toronto, Calgary, and Winnipeg have strong Eritrean communities that help newcomers find housing, jobs, and even traditional Eritrean food. Ever tried injera, a spongy sourdough flatbread, with spicy stews? If not, take a trip to Toronto's Danforth Avenue, where Eritrean restaurants are thriving. And speaking of jobs, Eritreans are finding opportunities in various fields. While many start in manufacturing, warehouse work, or construction, the new generation is making waves in nursing, IT, and entrepreneurship. Canada's government funding for refugee integration has helped thousands of Eritreans pursue higher education and skilled careers. Of course, challenges remain. many Eritreans arrive with limited English or French skills, making the first few years tough. Plus, adapting to Canada's harsh -30°C winters is no joke when you're coming from a country where it rarely drops below 15°C. But despite these obstacles, Eritreans have shown remarkable resilience, and today, they are an essential part of Canada's multicultural identity. Fun fact: if you ever visit an Eritrean wedding in Canada, get ready to dance. Eritrean traditional dances are fast-paced, energetic, and can last all night, a true reflection of their strong, unbreakable spirit. Number 6. Afghanistan. Afghanistan's story is one of war, resilience, and hope, and in the last few years, Canada has become a lifeline for thousands of Afghan immigrants. After the Taliban took over Afghanistan in August 2021, Canada announced one of the largest refugee programs in its history, aiming to resettle at least 40,000 Afghans. By the end of 2024, over 35,000 Afghans had already arrived in Canada, with more coming every month. But this immigration wave didn't just start recently. Since the 1980s, Canada has welcomed over 120,000 Afghans, many of whom came during the Soviet-Afghan War. Today, the Afghan-Canadian community is over 150,000 strong, with large populations in Toronto, Vancouver, and Calgary. So, what makes Canada such a preferred destination? For one, safety and stability. Many Afghans arriving in Canada are fleeing war, political persecution, and economic collapse. But once they land in Canada, they get access to free healthcare, public education, and financial support to help them rebuild their lives. And let's talk about education and jobs, two things Afghan immigrants prioritize heavily. Afghan parents place a huge emphasis on education, and in cities like Toronto, Afghan youth are enrolling in universities at record rates. Fields like medicine, engineering, and business have a growing number of Afghan-Canadian professionals, many of whom arrived as refugees just a decade ago. But challenges? Oh yeah, there are plenty. Many Afghan newcomers arrive without knowing English or French, making job hunting difficult. Others face credential recognition issues, where their degrees and experience from Afghanistan aren't recognized in Canada. This means doctors, engineers, and teachers often have to start from scratch, sometimes working in survival jobs like driving taxis or doing deliveries before they can return to their professions. But despite these struggles, Afghan immigrants are thriving. The number of Afghan-owned businesses in Canada is booming, and if you walk through Toronto's Thorncliffe Park neighborhood, you'll see Afghan grocery stores, kebab restaurants, and even Afghan clothing shops everywhere. One of the most beautiful aspects of the Afghan-Canadian community? Their hospitality. If you ever visit an Afghan household, be prepared to eat way more food than you can handle. From kebabs and rice dishes to Afghan green tea and desserts, they believe in sharing everything. And that's exactly the kind of warmth they've brought to Canada. Number 5. Cameroon. Now, let's talk about a country that's been making serious waves in Canada's immigration scene. Cameroon. Over the last decade, Cameroonians have been arriving in record numbers, and in 2024 alone, over 12,000 Cameroonians received permanent residency in Canada. Since 2015, the Cameroonian population in Canada has more than tripled, crossing the 80,000 mark. Why is Canada such a hot destination for Cameroonians? Well, one big reason is education. Canada is now one of the top study destinations for Cameroonian students, with over 5,000 Cameroonians enrolling in Canadian universities every year. With English and French as Cameroon's official languages, these students adapt quickly to Canadian life, often transitioning into permanent residence after graduation. Another key factor? Employment opportunities. Canada has been experiencing a severe labor shortage, and Cameroonians have been filling vital roles in healthcare, IT, construction, and skilled trades. Fields like nursing and engineering are particularly popular, with Cameroonians excelling in them thanks to strong STEM education in their home country. And let's talk about community, because Cameroonians stick together. The largest Cameroonian populations are in Montreal, Toronto, and Ottawa, where they have vibrant cultural associations, churches, and businesses. If you ever attend a Cameroonian party, expect non-stop dancing, loud music, and food that will blow your mind, especially their famous ndolé, a peanut stew, and plantains. But like any immigrant group, Cameroonians face their share of struggles. Many arrive with professional degrees that aren't recognized in Canada, forcing them to restart their careers. Others struggle with cold weather, because let's be real, when you're used to 30 degrees Celsius heat year-round, stepping into a minus 25 degrees Celsius winter in Montreal is a complete shock. Despite the challenges, Cameroonians are rising fast. The number of Cameroonian-owned businesses in Canada has doubled in the last decade, and their presence in Canadian politics and media is growing. With their strong work ethic, vibrant culture, and deep sense of community, Cameroonians are making a name for themselves in Canada like never before. And trust me, if you've never been to a Cameroonian wedding, you haven't lived. These parties go on for days with drums, dancing, and celebrations that feel like a carnival. Now that's the kind of energy Canada needs. Number 4. Nigeria. If there's one immigrant community that's absolutely booming in Canada, it's Nigerians. They are the largest group of African immigrants in Canada, and their numbers have skyrocketed in the last decade. As of 2024, there are over 150,000 Nigerians in Canada, with more than 15,000 new Nigerian immigrants arriving every year. That's nearly 42 Nigerians moving to Canada every single day. So, what's fueling this massive migration? One major reason is education. Canada has become the top destination for Nigerian students, and in 2024 alone, over 20,000 Nigerian students were enrolled in Canadian universities. This number has been doubling every few years. The best part? Many Nigerian students transition to permanent residency after graduation, making them long-term contributors to Canada's economy. And let's talk about careers, because Nigerians are thriving in Canada's job market. From medicine and engineering to IT and finance, Nigerians are entering high-paying fields at record rates. In fact, a 2022 study showed that Nigerians have one of the highest employment rates among immigrant groups in Canada, with over 80% working in professional or skilled jobs. But wait, it's not all about work. Let's talk about culture. If you've ever been to Toronto's Eglinton West or Calgary's Nigerian food spots, you know Nigerians bring flavor, energy, and music everywhere they go. Nigerian cuisine is taking over Canada, with dishes like jollof rice, suya, and egusi soup becoming more popular by the day. And let's not forget Afrobeats. Thanks to Nigerian artists like Burna Boy, Wizkid, and Davido, Nigerian music is dominating Canadian clubs and parties. Of course, challenges exist. One of the biggest struggles for Nigerian immigrants is housing. With rising rents in cities like Toronto and Vancouver, many Nigerian families are forced to relocate to smaller cities like Winnipeg, Regina, and Halifax. Another challenge? Credential recognition. Many Nigerian professionals, especially doctors and lawyers, have to redo their training to work in Canada. But despite these obstacles, Nigerians in Canada are unstoppable. Their influence in business, entertainment, politics, and sports is growing every year. And if you ever get invited to a Nigerian wedding, prepare for an event that lasts all night long, filled with dancing, money spraying, and insane amounts of food. Nigerians don't just move to Canada, they own it. Number 3. China. Let's shift gears and talk about China, a country that has been a dominant force in Canada's immigration scene for decades. The Chinese-Canadian population is now over 1.8 million, making it one of the largest immigrant groups in Canada. And every year, more than 30,000 Chinese immigrants make Canada their new home. So, why do so many Chinese people choose Canada? One word: opportunity. China's economy is booming, but competition is fierce, and many Chinese families see Canada as a place where their children can have a better education and work-life balance. That's why Chinese students make up nearly 40% of all international students in Canada, with over 100,000 Chinese students enrolled in Canadian universities right now. Speaking of success, Chinese immigrants have been some of the wealthiest and most successful groups in Canada. They dominate fields like real estate, business, technology, and finance. In Vancouver, Chinese-Canadian investors have played a massive role in the real estate market, making Vancouver one of the most expensive cities in North America. And let's not forget Chinatown. Whether it's Toronto, Vancouver, or Montreal, Canada has some of the best Chinese restaurants outside of China. If you've never had Peking duck, dim sum, or authentic Sichuan hot pot, you're missing out. Of course, there are challenges. Many older Chinese immigrants struggle with learning English or French, making it harder for them to integrate into Canadian society. Additionally, there has been rising tension due to Canada's strict immigration policies towards China in recent years. But despite these challenges, Chinese Canadians continue to thrive. From tech entrepreneurs to real estate moguls, Chinese immigrants are reshaping Canada's economy in a big way. Number 2. Philippines. If there's one immigrant community that keeps Canada running, it's the Filipinos. With over 1 million Filipino Canadians, they are now the third largest immigrant group in Canada. And get this, more than 20,000 Filipinos move to Canada every single year. That means, on average, 55 Filipinos arrive in Canada every day. So why do so many Filipinos choose Canada? One major reason: jobs, jobs, and more jobs. Filipinos are known for their strong work ethic and adaptability, making them highly sought after in industries like healthcare, hospitality, and customer service. Did you know that over 40% of all foreign-trained nurses in Canada are from the Philippines? And it's not just nurses. Filipino caregivers are the backbone of Canada's home care industry, helping thousands of families with elderly and childcare services. But here's the real magic. Filipinos don't just work hard, they bring joy wherever they go. If you know a Filipino, you know their love for karaoke, food, and community gatherings. In fact, Filipino households in Canada are famous for throwing the biggest and liveliest parties, filled with lechon, roast pig, lumpia, spring rolls, and pancit, noodles. And let's be honest, karaoke is basically a Filipino superpower. Filipinos have also mastered the art of adaptation. Many arrive in Canada through temporary work programs, but they find ways to secure permanent residency and eventually bring their families over. It's a long and difficult process. Some families wait 5 to 10 years to reunite. But once they do, the Filipino spirit shines brighter than ever. And let's not forget their impact on Canadian culture. Filipino communities in cities like Toronto, Vancouver, and Winnipeg are growing fast, and Jollibee, the world-famous Filipino fast food chain, now has multiple locations across Canada. Even major Canadian supermarkets now stock Filipino staples like banana ketchup, ubi, purple yam, and chicharron. Challenges, of course. Many Filipinos arrive in low-wage jobs and struggle to climb the economic ladder due to foreign credential issues. Others face long working hours and limited job mobility. But despite these hurdles, Filipinos in Canada never stop thriving. At the end of the day, Filipinos bring more than just hard work. They bring warmth, resilience, and an unbreakable sense of community. And let's be real, without Filipino nurses, caregivers, and hospitality workers, Canada simply wouldn't function. Number 1. India. When it comes to immigration, India is in a league of its own. With over 1.8 million Indian Canadians, Indians make up nearly 5% of Canada's population, and that number is growing fast. In 2024 alone, over 125,000 Indians moved to Canada, more than any other nationality in the world. That means, on average, 340 Indians arrive in Canada every single day. So why is Canada the #1 destination for Indian immigrants? One major reason: education. Indian students dominate Canada's international student scene, with over 320,000 Indian students currently enrolled in Canadian universities. That's nearly 1/3 of all international students in Canada. Fields like IT, engineering, business, and healthcare are packed with Indian professionals who later transition into permanent residency and high-paying jobs. But education is just the beginning. Let's talk business and jobs. Indians in Canada have one of the highest employment rates, with many working in tech, finance, medicine, and entrepreneurship. In cities like Toronto, Vancouver, and Calgary, Indian-owned businesses are booming, from software companies and consulting firms to restaurants and retail chains. And let's not forget the rise of Indian tech talent. Indian professionals are now dominating Canada's IT industry, with thousands working at major companies like Shopify, RBC, and Microsoft Canada. And of course, Indian culture is everywhere. You can't walk through Toronto, Brampton, or Surrey without seeing Indian restaurants, grocery stores, and Bollywood movie theaters. Indian festivals like Diwali are now massive celebrations in Canada, with cities like Vancouver and Toronto lighting up with fireworks, parades, and cultural performances. Even Canadian prime ministers and mayors join in on the fun. And let's talk about food, because Indian cuisine has taken over Canada. From butter chicken and biryani to samosas and chai, Indian food is now a mainstream favorite. Even Tim Hortons, Canada's biggest coffee chain, has introduced Indian-inspired drinks like chai lattes. Challenges? Absolutely. Many Indians face visa delays, high housing costs, and credential recognition issues. Some doctors, engineers, and professionals from India struggle to get their qualifications accepted in Canada, forcing them to start over in lower-paying jobs. Housing affordability is another issue, especially in cities like Toronto and Vancouver, where Indian families often spend years saving for a home. But despite these obstacles, Indians are thriving in Canada like never before. They are doctors, engineers, business owners, tech leaders, and politicians, shaping the future of Canada in a big way. And honestly, this is just the beginning. With Indian immigration numbers rising every year, the influence of Indian Canadians will only get stronger. So, whether it's in tech, business, entertainment, or food, one thing is clear: India is making Canada better, one immigrant at a time.